It started with laughter, the kind that stings even when you pretend not to hear it, the kind that echoes in your head long after the sound fades. A group of wealthy men sat at the finest table in the restaurant, their glasses filled with expensive wine, their arrogance spilling over every word. One of them looked up smirking and dropped his napkin to the floor. "Pick that up, would you?" he said, his tone soaked in condescension. When Jasmine Walker bent down, his friend added with a sneer, "People like you always stay where you belong." She straightened slowly, meeting his eyes with calm dignity, the kind that comes from quiet strength rather than pride. For a moment the laughter stopped, but then they turned away, dismissing her as if she were invisible. Nobody said a word. Not the guests, not the manager, not even the other waiters who witnessed it all. The evening continued with the same polished routine, the same soft music, the same pretense of elegance. Yet something in Jasmine's eyes had changed. "Before we go further, tell me, where are you watching from? What city are you in tonight? Leave a comment. Let's see how far this story reaches. And if you believe in justice, the kind that life delivers in its own time, then hit the like button and subscribe, because what happens next will make you believe in second chances." Now, back to the story. Jasmine Walker was 35, calm, graceful, and thoughtful. Her dark skin glowed softly under the dim restaurant lights, and her gentle eyes carried both kindness and resilience. She had worked at the Pearl, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, for years. Every day she served the rich and powerful, people who barely looked at her, who snapped their fingers when they wanted something, who assumed she was nothing more than a background detail in their expensive lives. But what they didn't know was that behind her quiet smile, Jasmine carried a dream much bigger than the walls of the Pearl. She had once trained as a chef, studied recipes late into the night, saved every extra tip she could, but circumstances had forced her to take this job as a waitress, to start from the bottom again. And though others looked down on her, she never forgot what she was capable of. That night, after the humiliation, Jasmine finished her shift without a single complaint. She thanked the manager, nodded to her colleagues, and stepped outside into the cool night air. The city lights flickered across the wet pavement, reflecting her tired but determined face. She sat on a bench near the restaurant, the hum of laughter still faintly audible from inside. Slowly, she reached into her bag and pulled out a worn leather notebook. Its pages were filled with hand-drawn sketches of restaurant interiors, lists of dishes, and cost breakdowns, the blueprint of her dream. She flipped to a page labeled "My Own Place," where she had drawn a small dining room filled with warm light and smiling faces. Beneath it, she had written a note to herself in careful handwriting. "One day I'll create a place where everyone feels seen." A gust of wind rustled the pages, and Jasmine smiled faintly. She whispered to herself, "They'll know soon enough what real flavor is." Inside the Pearl, the same men continued to laugh, unaware that the woman they mocked was already planning her rise. To them, she was invisible. But life has a way of shifting the light, of revealing what people fail to see when blinded by arrogance. Over the next few days, the memory of that evening lingered with her. She went to work as usual, polite and composed, her hair tied neatly, her uniform spotless. Some co-workers whispered about her behind her back, calling her too proud for a waitress. Others admired her patience but couldn't understand why she stayed. The truth was simple. She was watching, learning, preparing. Every order she took taught her how a restaurant truly worked, the rhythm of service, the way staff coordinated, the mistakes managers made, and the desires of the customers. While others saw a job, she saw a classroom. Late at night, after long shifts, she would walk to the small apartment she rented above a bakery and spend hours reading about business management, restaurant licensing, and culinary design. She was tired, but her determination burned brighter than her exhaustion. Every page she turned felt like one step closer to something greater. One night, her only friend at work, a kind older chef named Mr. Howard, saw her writing in the break room. "You never stop dreaming, do you?" he asked, smiling. She laughed softly, closing her notebook. "If I stop dreaming, I'll stay here forever." Howard nodded, handing her a cup of coffee. Then don't stop. People like you. You've got the recipe for something special. His words stayed with her. Jasmine had grown used to being underestimated, to people assuming she was just another face in the crowd. But beneath that calm exterior, she carried an iron resolve. She would build something of her own, not to prove them wrong, but to prove herself right. As the weeks went on, more little humiliations piled up. A customer snapping fingers, a coworker taking credit for her ideas, a manager blaming her for mistakes she didn't make. Each incident chipped away at her patience, yet instead of breaking her, it strengthened her resolve. She learned to smile through the insults, to use every slight as fuel. One day, she would think, they'll remember this face, but not for the reasons they expect. Then came another evening, a busy Saturday night. The restaurant was overflowing with guests, and Jasmine moved gracefully between tables, balancing plates and wine glasses with ease. The same group of rich men returned, laughing loudly, pretending not to recognize her. One of them made a sarcastic toast. To people who know their place. The others roared with laughter. Jasmine stood silently for a second, her face calm, but her eyes sharper than ever. "Enjoy your meal, gentlemen," she said softly, turning away. The sound of her voice carried a quiet authority that none of them noticed. Not yet. That night, as she locked her locker and prepared to leave, she looked back at the restaurant one last time. The sign above the door, the pearl, gleamed in the lamplight. "One day," she whispered again, "it'll shine for me." She didn't know how or when, but deep down, she knew her moment would come, and when it did, the same people who laughed at her would be the ones left speechless. Months passed, and the rhythm of Jasmine's days remained the same. Long shifts, polite smiles, and endless trays carried through crowded rooms. But behind that calm expression, something had changed. Each night after the restaurant closed, she sat at her small kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks filled with numbers, sketches, and recipes. She took online business courses, watched tutorials, and read everything she could find about running a restaurant. Sometimes she stayed up until dawn, practicing new dishes in her tiny apartment, her hands moving with purpose and quiet determination. Mr. Howard, the old chef who had worked in the Pearl for decades, began to notice the spark in her eyes. One evening, as they cleaned up together, he said softly, "You know, Jasmine, you cook better than most of the chefs who've come through here. You've got something real, something from the heart." Jasmine smiled but didn't reply. Words were not her focus anymore. Action was. She had learned that patience could be the sharpest tool for change. The restaurant's atmosphere had grown tense lately. Rumors spread through the kitchen like smoke. The owners were struggling financially, debts were piling up, and the Pearl, once the pride of the city's dining scene, might soon be sold. Some laughed about it, others worried. But Jasmine listened in silence. She didn't see an ending. She saw an opening. Late one night, she stayed behind after closing, standing alone in the dimly lit dining room. The tables were perfectly set. The air still carried the faint aroma of food and wine. She ran her hand across one of the linen tablecloths and whispered to herself, "One day this won't just be a dream." Days turned into weeks. Jasmine continued working as usual, serving customers with grace and calm. The same people who once ignored her now seemed restless, uncertain of the future. Then one morning an announcement came. The Pearl had officially been sold. A staff meeting was called, and everyone gathered in the main hall. Mr. Price, the manager, straightened his tie nervously, trying to appear composed. "Our new owner will arrive shortly," he said, forcing a smile. "Please, everyone, be respectful and professional." The waiters whispered among themselves, curious and anxious. Mr. Howard glanced toward the entrance, his brow furrowed. The door opened slowly, and in walked a woman in a tailored dark green suit, confident yet calm. Her steps were measured, her presence commanding. For a moment no one spoke. Then gasps spread through the room. It was Jasmine. The same woman who had carried trays, cleaned tables, and endured silent humiliation now stood before them. holding a folder of ownership documents. Mr. Price's face went pale. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Mr. Howard's eyes filled with pride. Jasmine looked around the room, her voice steady and warm. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Jasmine Walker. From today, I'll be running the Pearl." For a moment, all that could be heard was the faint hum of the air conditioner. Then scattered applause broke the silence, hesitant at first, then sincere. Jasmine smiled gently, her gaze resting briefly on Mr. Price. "I've seen what this place can be," she said. "And I know it can shine again. But this time we'll do it differently, with respect, with heart." As the meeting ended, the staff lingered in small groups, whispering in disbelief. Mr. Price approached her awkwardly, mumbling congratulations. Jasmine nodded politely, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'll expect your report on operations by the end of the week." Then she turned to Mr. Howard and smiled softly. "You once told me I was better than I believed. Thank you for reminding me who I was." That evening, Jasmine stayed late, walking through the restaurant that now belonged to her. She paused at the table where months ago she had been insulted, and for a moment her reflection in the glass seemed like someone else entirely. Stronger, freer. The soft lights glowed against the polished surfaces, and she felt a quiet peace settle inside her. It was no longer about proving them wrong, it was about proving herself right. A few weeks later, the restaurant reopened under her direction. The decor was refreshed but not ostentatious, the food reimagined with warmth and authenticity. Reviews began to spread, customers returned, and slowly the Pearl regained its sparkle. But fate had one more twist to offer. One evening, a reservation appeared on the list, a familiar name. Mr. Dalton, the wealthy businessman who had once laughed at her, was coming to dine with his friends. Jasmine looked at the list, smiled faintly, and said to her staff, "Let's make tonight perfect." They nodded, not yet knowing the full story behind that name. As the guests arrived, laughing and boasting as always, Jasmine stayed calm, greeting other patrons and managing the floor with quiet authority. The staff who once saw her as just a waitress now watched her with admiration. Mr. Dalton, unaware of who she was, sat down with his group, speaking loudly as always, confident that the world still revolved around him. But as the evening went on, something subtle began to shift. The air carried a quiet tension, the kind that precedes a revelation. Jasmine knew that tomorrow's sunrise would mark not just another day of business, but the moment when the past would finally meet the present, face to face. The guests take their seats, laughing and chatting about their latest investments, sipping expensive drinks as if the world belonged only to them. They barely glance at the menu, waving to call a waiter, one of them smirking as he mutters something about expecting proper service this time. A moment later, footsteps echo softly across the marble floor. The men look up and freeze. Jasmine walks toward them, graceful, poised, dressed in a stunning dark green gown that reflects the warm glow of the chandeliers. Her smile is calm, almost serene, and her eyes carry quiet strength. One of the men, the same who once made her pick up his napkin, stammers, "Wait, you still work here?" Jasmine meets his gaze, her tone gentle but steady. "Yes," she replies, "I still work here. Only now, I'm the one responsible for the entire restaurant." The laughter dies, their faces pale slightly, confusion mixing with disbelief. The man at the head of the table tries to recover, offering an awkward chuckle, but Jasmine continues, her voice even and composed. "You once laughed at me for serving your table," she says softly, "but you didn't realize that I was also serving my dream." A heavy silence falls over the room. Even the background noise of clinking glasses and quiet conversation seems to fade. The men exchange glances, and for the first time they seem unsure of what to say. Jasmine places a bottle of the restaurant's finest wine on their table and adds, "Enjoy your evening, gentlemen. And thank you. Your arrogance reminded me why I should never stop moving forward." Without bitterness, without anger, she turns and walks away, her presence leaving a silence that feels heavier than any reprimand. A few nearby guests whisper, recognizing her from recent articles praising the restaurant's new owner, the woman who transformed the Pearl into a rising star of the culinary world. Jasmine pauses by the window, gazing outside at the softly lit street. The city hums beyond the glass. A world that once seemed distant now feels entirely within her reach. Her reflection in the window is calm, dignified, a woman who earned every step of her journey. Mr. Howard approaches quietly, wiping his hands on his apron, his face lit with pride. "You did it, Jasmine," he says warmly. She turns to him with a soft smile, her voice filled with quiet triumph. "I just did what I was meant to do," she replies. "I believed in myself when no one else did." Howard nods, emotion flickering in his tired eyes. The restaurant buzzes gently behind them. Laughter, the clinking of glasses, the rich aroma of freshly prepared dishes. For the first time, Jasmine doesn't feel like an outsider. She feels like she belongs, like the dream she once sketched in that old notebook has finally come to life. Later that night, as the guests leave and the lights dim, she walks through the dining hall one last time, her hand brushing across the polished tables. Each one carries a memory of struggle, of humiliation, of small victories that built her strength. She stops near the entrance where she once stood in a plain uniform waiting for orders. Now her name shines in gold on the plaque by the door. Jasmine Walker, owner and head of the Pearl. A soft piano melody plays in the background as the voice of the narrator returns, calm and reflective. "Never laugh at those who serve you today," it says, "for tomorrow they might become the ones you'll serve." Respect is not about status, it is the mirror of your soul. Jasmine looks once more around the room, her eyes filled with gratitude, then steps outside into the night where the air feels different, freer, lighter, filled with the scent of new beginnings. She takes a deep breath, her heart steady, her purpose clear. The city lights shimmer before her like a promise fulfilled. The story fades with her smile, not the smile of revenge, but of peace. And as the music softens, the final words echo to the audience. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Do you believe that hard work and kindness always come back to you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else. The screen fades to black, leaving only her name, a symbol of resilience and quiet strength, reminding everyone watching that true success begins when you refuse to let others define your worth.